new. I haven't seen anyone new join in like a minute or two. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Hunter Pattison. I'm the current chair of the LGBTQ Advisory Committee. We thank you for joining us today on this town hall as we kind of gather more information from our members about potentially pursuing the idea of moving from a committee to a section. Briefly, we just wanted to kind of go over the agenda for this. I was just kind of run through a very quick PowerPoint presentation for a couple minutes, but I really wanted to leave the bulk of this town hall open for all of you as attendees. Please feel free to, if you have any questions or any commentary or anything like that you want to volunteer or bring up to discuss, that's what this is for. So just real quick, I guess we'll go over kind of the background of how this came to be, as well as the structure, objectives of section, and the difference between the committee and a section, and then Q&A from everyone else. Thanks, Charlotte. So just real quick, the current advisory committee on LGBTQ issues. I was going to go ahead and let everyone on the call introduce themselves. Like I said before, I'm Hunter Pattison. I'm the current chair, as well as the resident fellow section representative. I'm an emergency medicine physician out in Sacramento, California.
I'll jump in. So, hi, everybody. I'm Carl, he, him, his. I'm a primary care doc and a research lead in our Center for Transmedicine and Surgery at Boston Medical Center, as well as other hats, most notably for this call, vice chair for the advisory committee. I'll pass it off to Frank.
Thank you. I'm Frank Dowling, psychiatry and addiction medicine from New York, a longtime active MISNI delegate to the House of Delegates. I'm also on the AMA's Substance Use and Opioid Task Force, and pleased to serve as past chair of this committee. Let's see, Dr. Green is not able to make it. Dr. Mangi is not able to make it. Dr. Schneider, I think I saw you join us.
Hey there, everybody. Jason Schneider, School of Medicine and Emory-based ophthalmology.
Jason, I think you were breaking up, but Dr. Schneider is from Emory School of Medicine, and he's a current member at large. Molly, did you want to introduce yourself? I think Molly was on this. Yeah. Or maybe she's having trouble connecting. We also have with us right now Charlotte Grill, who's our current AMA staffer that works with the advisory committee, as well as Dr. David Azis, who is one of our two representatives from the Board of Trustees assigned specifically to the advisory committee, in addition to a few AMA staffers who are here just to help us for any specific details to questions that we might not know right off the top of our head the answer to. So just real quick, going into how a section is, kind of organized and structured. Many of you are already familiar with this. Oh, did someone say something or have something to say? Many of you are already familiar with this, as you have already been part or involved within the AMA, but we have our individuals and representatives from different societies, state organizations, or just general attendees that make up our assembly, and they then go ahead and elect a governing council which oversees the assembly. And they also help with the development of subcommittees or committees or subcommittees that are then appointed by that specific governing council. And then when we talk about the big objectives, and this comes up all the time too in the House of Delegates, there's three big themes when it comes to a section. There's trying to develop policy that makes an impact and serves to advocate for us and for our patients and healthcare in general. There's member engagement, engaging peers in the activities of all within the AMA, and then and most importantly, the middle one, which is cultivating the next generation of leaders and honing the skills of current established leaders within the AMA, so that we can continue to engage our members and develop impactful policy. This will, come up, or this has come up in the past by members who have come forward to talk about the difference between an advisory committee and section. So we just kind of wanted to illustrate out real quickly, but if you have any other questions later on, please feel free to ask away. The main difference when it comes to with a committee versus a section in structure is the audience. So with a section, our audience is the House of Delegates. Whereas with the advisory committee, our main audience is just the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees usually will get a representative from different sections or application, and then they're the ones who determine and appoint whoever the members that make up the advisory committee are. Whereas within a section, that's elected by the General Assembly and section membership, who selects which who they want to have as in charge of their specific or in their leadership position. With a section, we have a delegate and alternate delegate that are able to speak on the floor and directly introduce and speak on policy within the House of Delegates. As well as the ability to run and endorse candidates for councils, Board of Trustees, AMA officers, which we do not have as an advisory committee currently. In regards to the committee, we usually have to work through delegates from other organizations if there's any specific policy, germane to issues that we are passionate about or we think can affect us or our patients. We don't have the ability to directly speak on it or introduce it within the House of Delegates. And then one of the other benefits for looking at potentially becoming a section is the ability to expand that umbrella, within our AMA for any member that might feel that they want to become part of, LGBTQ future section, potential future section, and create leadership positions within more positions that people can run for, as well as more positions to get involved with committees and subcommittees, things like that.
Before you move on, I think one thing to point out here is just for folks who might be concerned, committees and governing councils are funded and have support to participate in both. So switching between a committee and section governance structure would not change the opportunity for folks, particularly students, residents, and so forth, to be able to be supported to be able to attend meetings. So I just want to make sure people understand that.
Thanks, Carl. So just to kind of give you an illustration, here are former committees or advisory committees of the board that have moved and applied for and successfully become sections in the past 20 years. Most recently, I believe, was the private physicians, the PPP, the private physicians practice section. But we've while looking at potentially moving towards applying to become a section, we have definitely tried to get input, in particular from minority affairs, women's physician section, to kind of see how what that process looks like, what their structure as a governing council looks like. So there has been a road that has been paved in the past in regards to transitioning from a committee to a section. And then one final point that we just wanted to highlight is at the past annual meeting in Chicago, their section collaboration is what helped drive introduction of a significant amount of equity related policy that we were able to discuss within the House of Delegates. And these are just a couple examples. If anyone wants any more, we'd be happy to provide that of a summary of kind of what was discussed. But just to kind of show you, what else what the other benefits of, having a delegate, or, a direct voice on the floor can do if we were to consider moving towards this route. So I'm going to stop talking. If there's any questions, please feel free to, I think the easiest way to do this is either if you want to put something in the chat box, or if you want to raise your hand, and then we can kind of call on you, and then, we'll have one of the AC members or one of the staffers help answer based on, their experience. But we kind of want to turn it over to everyone else and see, what thoughts, what concerns, what opinions, what's been your past experience. This is mainly a chance for us to listen to our members, because we really don't get that that many chances to do that.
I think maybe perhaps to kind of generate or get some people thinking, would folks here be okay if the advisory committee moved on to becoming a section? Are there any concerns from folks in attendance if we were to make that move at this point? So I do see one question in the chat from Glenn in terms of what, if any, are the possible downsides. I mean, feel like that's a matter of individual members for what their experience has been. That's what we're trying to gather, is kind of get an idea of, are we missing some perspective here in terms of where there could be a downside? We've all been racking our brains. There wouldn't really be, as far as we can tell. There would still be a board liaison, so there'd still be direct connection to the board. We'd still have support for people across sections and so forth to be able to be actively involved in leadership. I feel like one of the big pros would be the section itself would not have to go like, oh, we have a great idea for a policy, we need to go find a delegation that's going to support it. The section would be its own delegation to be able to do that. So that's the best answer. I mean, different downsides. I mean, it depends on how much do you like doing elections instead of being appointed by the board. People would be going through elections to be governing council. So pros and cons there, of course. So I think it's a matter of perspective, which we're trying to get from folks at this point.
And I think there was another question, what needs to be met in order to become a section. Basically there is a process that's delineated by the House where we would have to first submit an application for approval. I believe, is it to the board or is it to the House, Charlotte? Do you?
I mean, so the board has to approve it.
Right. In addition to the development of future internal operating procedures to how the future section and governing council will be structured and made up. From there, I believe that goes through the council on Constitution and Bylaws, and then goes back. So I think it is at least going to be a year-long, if not a multi-year long process. Again, though, because we wanted to, try and make sure that we're hearing from our membership, we wanted to get as much information on this as possible before even considering to move forward with this. Anyone have any comments, any specific questions?
There's a new question.
Yeah,
what kind of info?
Chase. Yeah, what kind of info from members are you looking for? I mean, those are all experiences we'd like to hear. I think it's a matter of what has been your experience in terms of getting what you want done working through sections. Chase, based on your title, It looks like working through the med student section, how has that experience been? Because that would be kind of a little bit like what we're trying to move towards, instead of a committee that meets before the HOD and then tries to shepherd other work through. This would be a situation where we could have an assembly meeting, we'd have potential subcommittees under the section itself, and then anything we'd want to get done, our delegate would be able to do during the HOD component of the meetings. I think I would say, as somebody who was a member as a student and some of the history, the committee had some benefits in terms of being able to, in the past, bring up issues that maybe some folks didn't feel comfortable being out about in terms of discussing issues within the HOD. I think there's been a wonderful progression over the years where why we feel a section is something that can happen now, since there is much more support both internal to the AMA, but also in medicine in general, to where an LGBTQ section could exist.
I had a question. Can you have both the committee and the section council, or not? Yeah, and the section both in existence at the same time? The Psychiatric Association, American Psychiatric, you can have both committees, and you can also have a group that's in their assembly of district branches.
This was brought up before, of whether or not we could potentially have both. I think the structure may potentially be there. I think when it comes to the funding assigned and allocated, to have members either that are on the governing council within a section or that are currently on the advisory committee that are able to attend the meetings, I don't see the approval to have that funding be allocated, which I think is a big part of having that ability to have members paid for and go into meetings like annual and interim and other meetings throughout the year. And so I think that while yes, it may be able to do that, I don't think we'd be able to do that with two entities that are having paid positions in order to go to these meetings.
And not that what has been done before has to be what's done now. There is no prior advisory committee that continues to exist after a section has been created in their place. There's a significant redundancy in the work. See, Scott has his hand up.
So thanks to the AC for putting this together, and thanks for getting our inputs. I think the lack of concerns that have been raised by people here is indicative of kind of what you're feeling, and you've presented to us well. I'll just share from a past AC chair perspective to complement or to reinforce everything you're saying, that there's more and more work to be done in the House, and the current structure does not allow us to fully participate. We do via GLAMA, but we don't with any staff support. We don't participate in the House with any elections. We really don't have a formal role in being able to weigh in on the writing process. We used to think that, because we're an advisory committee, we have a special status and we can have more access to help on writing reports or partnering. But all of those things, from staff support to participation in elections, writing resolutions, all would be gained access. I can't understate the importance of staff support as well, because once that AC meeting ends prior to the meeting, if we essentially lose staff support, and we know how incredibly important our staff support is to be able to help facilitate the work that we do. So I think from a structural standpoint, and having talked to multiple prior staff members of this committee, they all give their support to this. So, if you're to forget what the members, what they say, and just do what the staff members say, the staff members give support. And of course, I haven't talked to every one of them, but I've talked to the three that I've worked with, who all think that this is the right way to go. So that gives me more confidence to speak from not only the member side, but also from the structural governance side, that this is the right thing to do without reservation.
Thanks, Scott.
I see a question in the chat in terms of the general question of what these various sections do. So the overarching thing is sections have the ability to play a role in policy development from a variety of perspectives. Some of them are based on the perspective of students, perspective of resident fellows, young physicians, and so forth. Many different ways of looking at it. There are the minority affairs section looks at it from a minority affairs perspective, but everybody has the opportunity to collaborate. So it's not just that, but that is the main organizing feature of these different sections, is some shared identity or component in our training. And from there, policy is developed and policy is put forward before the House of Delegates. The House of Delegates operates very much like Congress in a lot of different ways. And then from there, policies that are passed are acted on by the AMA. That is like the fast and dirty of policy work in the AMA. And the purpose of this is to see if we want to have one that is LGBTQ focused, to have a section that is that in name and in operation. It is not about political fundraising. That's a completely separate component. And in terms of patients and physicians and trainees, this is all part of what the AMA tries to do. This would be a focused look at LGBTQ related issues. I hope that answers the question.
More eloquently than I could have answered. Thank you, Carl.
And James, you have your hand up.
I was just wondering, as I'm watching this, I was a physician back in 1981. I and one of my colleagues, Dave Kessler, who went to an AMA meeting, and I think it was the first time that they had openly gay psychiatrists addressing an issue. There was a report that was coming out at that particular time that many of us objected to. So it's fascinating to watch over the years how things have changed from those days when gays were not part of the AMA, at least openly, to see where we are today. I guess my question is there really any opposition to this kind of change? Or is it just entirely a more mechanical one that gives better access through the AMA assembly rather than through the Board of Trustees? It really would be ideal in the Psychiatric Association. It's wonderful because you can have the minority groups can have access through the board, report to the board, but there's also another group that can report directly to the Psychiatric Association Assembly. So is there any opposition to this change?
Hunter, do you mind letting me answer? It's Frank.
I would love for you to answer, Frank.
As a psychiatrist, I'm just going to point out, in the APA, the assembly, which is akin to the AMA House of Delegates, as great as it is, and I've been a member in the assembly for a few years at a time twice, is a great body, but in the end, it only recommends. The Board of Trustees actually determines policy as well as carrying it out, whereas in the AMA, the House of Delegates is the policy-making body, and the Board of Trustees carries out what comes from the AMA, even things that are referred to the board for further study, consideration, and recommendations go back to the House to then decide. So that's a big difference, and that's where the influence and the ability to push the policy is greater, to have more of a stake and voice in the House. But in general, I don't think anybody on the board is opposed to helping us on LGBTQ plus issues that matter in the entire membership or the entire House of Delegates. There's a minority of members who may be conservative and may not understand these issues or appreciate their importance. So I wouldn't say we're 100%, but we're 80 to 90% of the House of Delegates every time an important issue comes to a vote. The AMA is a lot more progressive than a lot of people think it is when you look at who's actually attending meetings and writing resolutions and passing them.
I'll also say that while there may have been a significant amount of progress that's been made within the AMA, there's still a lot of work to do outside the AMA when it comes to working with, educating our peers, colleagues, patients, the general political landscape. And so, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
And again, I would highlight the section, becoming a section does not mean we lose a channel to the board. I think we were mistaken to not introduce, but Dr. Azis, who's our board liaison for the committee, is on this call. We would continue to have board liaisons. Each section has a board liaison as well.
I think we do have a couple questions that we pre-populated on a poll. Charlotte, do you want to put those up?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to answer these poll questions, we're just going to be asking for your feedback on if you support moving forward as a section or not. We should be getting those questions up momentarily. So I think unless there's any other questions, once you answer those poll questions, we should be all set tonight. I'm going to put my email address as well in the chat, so feel free to email me any questions. And we recorded the meeting, so if you would like a copy or know someone who wasn't able to attend tonight, we can share the meeting out as well so they could view and get an understanding of the discussion tonight.
And Charlotte, we'll be able to send out those poll questions as well to people who weren't able to make it, correct?
Correct.
Great.
Kira, would you mind please pulling up the poll questions now if you can? Thank you. And thank you everyone for your time tonight.
Charlotte, were there just 2 or were there 4? I forgot.
There was just 2.
Okay. I don't know why I thought there were 4.
Also, just a reminder, folks, we're all available offline as well. Hunter and I have already dropped our emails in the chat. Charlotte, if you don't mind just dropping your email in the chat so you have access to staff as well.
And please feel free to email us if there's any questions that you guys have, or if there's anything that, if you, as we've kind of continue gathering, information about this for potentially, submitting an application. If you'd like to help out with the process at all or anything like that, please let us know as well. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you have a good rest of your evening, and looking forward to seeing those of you who might be able to attend Honolulu in a couple months.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that went well.